If you grew up any time in the last 60 years or so, hearing names like Rudolph or Frosty probably conjures up a really specific image, right? These charming, kind of jerky stop-motion characters that basically owned the holiday season on TV. But the story behind these Rankin Bass specials, oh, it's so much bigger than just a few cute stories. I mean, just think about it for a second. The Island of Misfit Toys, the Heat Miser and Snow Miser songs, a full-on origin story for Santa Claus. These weren't just shows you'd stumble upon. They were appointments. For millions of us, the minute these came on, that's when you knew the holidays had officially started. Now, here's something that's really interesting that you might not know. Rankin/Bass was basically operating in two totally different visual styles. On one hand, you had their iconic stop motion, which they actually called animagic. That's the look of Rudolph and Santa Claus is coming to town. But on the other hand, they did classic, hand-drawn 2D animation, which is how we got specials like Frosty the Snowman. It's like they had two different worlds, all coming from the same creative studio.
So let's start with the style that really put them on the map, Animagic. And it all kicked off with one single special that became, and I'm not exaggerating, a cultural institution.
Back in 1964, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer hit the airwaves, and believe me, holiday TV was never, ever the same. It was originally made for NBC and General Electric, and get this, it has aired on TV at least once every single year since it premiered. That is an absolutely incredible run. It's one of the longest-running traditions in TV history, period. And its journey across the networks is just as wild. It started out on NBC, right? Then it jumped over to CBS for a massive 50-year stint, before finally, in 2024, coming all the way back home to NBC. This thing has been a primetime staple for literally generations of families. And of course, they didn't just stop with Rudolph. Building on that incredible success, Rankin Bass churned out a whole lineup of Animagic classics. We got the definitive Santa Claus origin story, the legendary Mizza Brothers, and they even started branching out into other holidays. They weren't just making one-off specials anymore. They were building an entire world. And that right there is where this whole story gets really fascinating. Because long before giant blockbuster movies made it cool, Rankin Bass was quietly piecing together a connected universe with all of their characters. So could this actually be the very first shared cinematic universe on television? I mean, we all think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as this epic thing today, but Rankin Bass was linking their worlds together decades before that. And the big finale, the main event, was Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July. This wasn't just your standard half-hour special. No, this was a 2-hour TV movie event that dropped in 1979, which, for the time, was a massive, massive deal. And this thing brought everybody to the party. You had Santa, of course, but you also got cameos from characters like Jack Frost, and even Big Ben the Whale from Rudolph's Shiny New Year. But to pull this all off, they had to do something pretty revolutionary. They took Frosty the Snowman, who was always a 2D hand-drawn character, and they actually brought him into the stop-motion world as an animagic puppet for the first time ever. And it's not a stretch to say it, this was their Avengers. This was the grand culmination of their entire shared universe, bringing all the heavy hitters together for one giant epic story. Okay, but if you go back and watch these specials as an adult, you might start to notice something else. Tucked away in all these charming holiday stories are some surprisingly grown-up and, let's be honest, kind of dark themes. Let's talk about Nestor the long-eared Christmas donkey. There's a moment where the narrator describes how Nestor's mother shields him from this brutal blizzard, and he says this line. As a kid, you just kind of hear the words, but what does "the storm took her" really mean? And this really lays it out. When you're a child, you just imagine she was magically whisked away, right? Like taken by the winter wind in a puff of snow. But watching it as an adult, the heartbreaking truth just hits you like a ton of bricks. That little mound of snow that Nestor is crying next to, that's his mother. She wasn't just gone. She froze to death, sacrificing her own life to save her son. It is an unbelievably sad moment that just completely flies over our heads as kids. But like all good things, the golden age of Rankin/Bass had to come to an end. And it left behind a legacy that's, well, a little more complicated than you might think. Their very last Animagic stop-motion special came out in 1985, called The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. And what's really weird about it is that it was based on a book by L. Frank Baum.
Yep, the same guy who created The Wizard of Oz. And it gave a totally different origin for Santa, completely separate from the universe they had just spent decades building. So after that last big Animagic special in '85, the company started running into some trouble. They officially shut down production not long after 1987. After that, there was only one final original special in 2001 called Santa Baby. And just like that, the magic was kind of gone. So who's in charge of keeping these specials alive today? Well, the answer is messy, because the rights are split right down the middle. Universal Pictures owns most of the stuff made before September 1974. That includes the original Rudolph. Meanwhile, Warner Bros. Owns most of the library from after that date, like The Year Without a Santa Claus. This split is the exact reason why you might find Rudolph on one streaming service and the Miser Brothers on a totally different one. It's a very fractured kingdom. And this messy ownership situation led to some, let's call them, unofficial sequels. In 1992, we got Frosty Returns, which was made by a totally different company with a new look. And then in 2008, Warner Bros. Made The Miser Brothers Christmas, a stop-motion spin-off. So the stories kept going, but they weren't the original Rankin Bass productions anymore. When you step back and look at the whole picture, these specials are so much more than just simple cartoons. They were a pioneering shared universe, a time capsule of amazing animation, and a collection of stories with some real emotional weight. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other classics from our childhood are hiding these complex, deeper stories, just waiting for us to see them again with adult eyes?